So it does appear we have a breaking story here about the Supreme Court. Looks like they've issued a rare ruling that temporarily blocks the Texas social media law that went into law in the state of Texas. They basically had banned the social media platforms in Texas from being able to ban anyone for their political opinions. And it's a big debate as to whether or not these are, if these social media platforms are deemed to be private actors, then it's essentially undebatably going to be that these private platforms have their own rights to free speech, and the curating of the content on their platform itself, that is their free speech. And so the government can't pass a law telling them that they can't curate content the way that they want to because they're a private actor, ergo having that act the protection against the government, because that's their free speech. So that's essentially the argument right now. But you may have to basically be able to, you may have to look at them as these companies as being more than just private entities and being some more subject to public regulation and that kind of thing. Maybe it's like a utility. I know there's some people out there who say that it should be regulated as a utility instead of being a private thing because these are the squares of public speech. So that's the debate. It's interesting to see what the Supreme Court would do because it's stacked with conservatives now. But this is just a temporary blockage, so it's not a finalized solution. So it makes it an interesting case. There's a Texas law that would bar social media companies from taking action on hate speech and disinformation was temporarily blocked Tuesday in a rare 5-4 Supreme Court ruling. Justice John Roberts, Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, Sonia Sotomayor, and Stephen Breyer ruled in favor of tech industry groups looking to block the law, with Samuel Alito, Clarence Thomas, Neil Gorsuch, and Elena Kagan dissenting. So it's an interesting vote. These are more interesting votes because you have some people seemingly supposedly crossing party lines. You have Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh crossing lines. They voted in favor of the injunction against the law that was put into place. So this means that while it's going through the court system, platforms will not be allowed to be sued in Texas for curating their content. So that's what this essentially means. It doesn't mean that it's a finalized decision. It says Alito, Clarence Thomas, Neil Gorsuch. Those are obviously all conservatives. The interesting flip on the left wing, the liberal side, is Elena Kagan. She's dissenting in this one, saying that it should be allowed to be upheld for now as it's going through the court system. It says the decision is a win for tech groups pushing back on laws coming from Republican-controlled state legislatures that seek to put barriers on social media companies' ability to moderate content. A case on the law itself may wind up back before the Supreme Court as it makes its way through the challenges in lower courts. But Tuesday's decision means the law, which critics have said could lead to a more dangerous internet, will remain blocked for now in Texas, reversing a decision from a court of appeals earlier this month. Honestly, I think that this case is this is going to be a really landmark case. This is going to be one of our societal defining, country nation defining cases, because now you're going to have the most influential platforms for speech and just society as a whole, Twitter, Facebook, etc. They're going to have to decide whether or not these platforms can be regulated and whether or not their curation of content based on whatever their decisions are, is that protected under the First Amendment as free speech. Because what they have determined is that yes, as those private actors, Twitter, Facebook, they're private actors, that curation of content is their free speech. Ergo, a state or the nation can't pass a law abridging their right to free speech. So, are they going to say they're going to change their designation as a private actor to something like a public utility or something like that? Given that this is a very politically charged issue where it's mostly Republicans who are saying that this should be the case, which is funny because it's the Republicans wanting to, regulate and govern and regulate small business, or not small business, but just business period. My bad on that. But basically, this is a very politically charged case. The court is stacked with Republicans, so I would expect that the court would end up ruling in favor of the Texas state instead of the tech industry groups. This would be absolutely massive if it were to go through, because it would completely change our understanding of these platforms and what these platforms are allowed to do. And also it'll change a lot of liabilities that these companies will have. This is Alito's dissenting opinion. He said he has not formed a definitive view on the novel legal questions that arise from Texas's decision to address the changing social and economic conditions it perceives. But precisely because of that, I'm not comfortable intervening at this point in the proceedings. While I understand the court's apparent desire to delay enforcement of HB 20 while the appeal is pending, the preliminary injunction entered by the district court was itself a significant intrusion on state sovereignty. Texas should not be required to seek pre-clearance from the federal courts before its laws go into effect, he added. So he's basically saying that this injunction that's placed on the Texas laws is an intrusion on state sovereignty. So he voted against it. But this is definitely a huge deal. This is only a temporary ruling, though. It's not a permanent one. And I find it inevitable that it's going to reach back to the Supreme Court. And for our modern era, this is going to be one of the most influential and societally defining court cases, period, because once the Supreme Court decides this, it's going to be a landmark decision. And especially with how conservative the court is, they're probably going to vote in favor of, I would say, the state of Texas or the state of Florida. Then what's going to happen? Then you're going to have everything is going to change. The regulations are going to change. There's going to be a bunch more liabilities for these social media platforms. They might be designated more as utilities than being designated as private actors. So it's a really important case to keep an eye on, man. This is going to be huge for case law. So 5-4 vote upholding the injunction on the Texas social media law, meaning it won't be allowed to go into effect until it's done going through the court process, eventually likely making it back up to the Supreme Court. And some party line crossings that we can see. Kagan dissenting, and I believe it was Barrett and Kavanaugh that are voting in favor. So interesting stuff that we're seeing here.